Stay right there. What are you waiting for? Kill them! Kill them both! No, wait a minute. Is it money you're after? I'll give you as much as you want.
May the saints forgive you, because I won't.
Christian, thank you so much for coming on the show. You are a very cool online writer. You're not just an online writer, but you are a writer more broadly and a poet, and you host all these different kind of like gonzo things, and your project's kind of gonzo. It's very cool. I would say it's very in keeping with this show, which I like to cheekily, millennially, which I know you kind of also are. Like you have that aesthetic, at least, of the millennial hipster circa like 2008. So that is kind of what this show is like a aeonic audio easing. So I want you to plug everything that you want to plug, Christian. And again, thank you so much for coming on. And you generously sent me an advanced copy of the book, so I really appreciate that. And I highly recommend people follow you and buy the book and all that.
Well, yeah. Again, just thanks for having me on, Jen. I really appreciate it. I've been just recently getting into the show, and it seems really cool. I guess I just recently released 2 books, Cunnus and the Cunnus Response Project, that came out on my birthday, July 27th, out on Anxiety Press. Cunnus is kind of, I consider it a performance art piece almost in a way, but it's a text I wrote in 29 days, attempting to try and fully express and overcome myself. So it's really strange and surreal, and I talk to different versions of myself and imagine characters that kind of represent different parts of myself, and talk about a bunch of weird little childhood memories that are uncomfortable and weird. And then there's the Cunnus Response Project, where I got 39 different writers and artists to read Cunnus and then write something about it. I didn't really give them specific instructions of what it had to be. I told them they could do whatever they wanted, but just to keep it in the vein of the intensity towards self-creation and overcoming and expression. And then I write my own responses back to each of the responses, kind of talking about how it made me feel, or just reacting in kind. I also have my book of 1,000 poems, which is out on DFL Lit. That came out in 2024. It's got a bunch of poems in it. So that's my little pitches, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christian. I'll make sure all of those links are in the show notes for anyone who wants to. Obviously, I want everyone to check them out, but I'll definitely make sure the links are there. Let's start at the name. I know this is probably no pun, but old hat for you. So why Cunnus?
I always refuse to answer that question. The Cunnus is the Cunnus. There's several people speculate on the meaning of the title in the Cunnus Response Project, so I don't want to. They all have different answers, so I don't want to set it down too concretely.
This is a very flexible. I use very flexible frameworks, Christian. So it's okay if you wanted to go very speculative. I would have been okay with that. I have my own idea of why perhaps you named it. I don't know. Maybe it does parallel someone in the book, but I mean, I don't have to say it, but I think it's. To me, it seems. Well, I think it's very like primordial yoni, like you're kind of like re-emergent. Like if you want to use very like new age term, it's kind of like rebirth or um that kind of like process of becoming. Like it's like returning to the seed, the fetal sort of like being the child without preconception. The child, I'm going to use Kabbalah. I'm sorry, I have to
Go
because
ahead.
that's how
Yeah,
my
yeah.
mind works. But like it's like returning to the child at Malkuth, and then you're walking through the threshold of perception, the gateway, if you want to use Kenny G language, Kenneth Grant. You're walking through the gateway of perception and sort of seeing the world for the first time. And in Kabbalah, that takes place at Yesod, which is the moon, but that's just a metaphor for your mind. So you're walking through this gateway. It's likened to a bride or a child, and it can also be very much likened to, well, I shouldn't say likened so much because you're a writer, I should try not to use repetition maybe, but
Fine.
you walk through the threshold and you sort of you are the witness to the creation and destruction of the world. You don't at this point have names for things. So one thing I thought was interesting in your introduction was that you said you kind of create magical characters and sort of, but they're all versions of you in a way. I don't want to speak for you, but they kind of have an interdialogue. So this would be the sort of mercurial element or the Hode like element, this kind of like intradialogic thing between like your feelings and your sort of perceptions or names of the world at this sort of starting point, like the hero's journey. I don't usually use that kind of language, but a lot of people seem to understand at least what I'm talking about if I give that analogy.
Mhm. Yeah,
I don't know. What do you think of all that? Sorry about that, Christian.
No, I think that's a really good way to put it and talk about it. Like with all the different characters that I'm speaking with and everything, my idea when I was writing it was like I wrote it very quickly and without kind of thinking about it. I'm really into like automatic writing, so that's basically the approach I used with it. But my thinking was like every written word in it is an expression of myself, and like I wasn't like intentionally trying to like create these characters that represent like this certain part of me or this other part of me. Like I just kind of let these characters come about, and I was like, I'm sure this means something about myself because I'm writing it. But you mentioned it being like kind of a gateway towards, I guess, self-realization or self-overcoming, and I think that's a really good way to put it. And I think I might like use that kind of phrase or something like that in the book itself. But like I do kind of think of it as, and I kind of think of all of my writing up to this point as being about trying to attain like a kind of personal freedom, or at least a freedom of expression through words, um, that I would hope would come into my like daily life and affect it in a meaningful way.
You're totally right on that. Like, I mean, I agree with you. I don't know if you're totally right, but like, I agree. I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that the purpose is like, I would say it's non-dual gnosis for me. Like, that's the kind of framework I would usually give it. It's like this kind of higher. It's like some people would say it's like with your daemon or your HGA, holy guardian angel, higher guardian angel. I always call it holy guardian, but anyways, it's like a higher self. It's like past Tiferet, past the sun. You're going to that secret space called, some people call it death, some people say it's there, some people say it's not there. I think it's sort of, I think it's both. So we won't get into that, maybe, or maybe we will, but yeah, it's like it's a higher gnosis. It's like tapped in, as like the kids like to say, but it's also like part of yourself. Like there's something that is also of you. And I also want to shout out that I did attend one of the Cunnus readings that
Awesome.
very good friend of the show, Dickie, was at, and like plugged to me and was like, you need to come. And of course listened and was like, I came, and I was really happy I did, because I got to hear so many amazing writers and poets kind of like read their responses to you, and I got to see your wife and like hear like all the nice things she had to say about you. So that was honestly, like, I felt like in a very parasocial way, maybe I felt like I really got to know you through that.
Good. Yeah, that's something that's been really great about the book. Um, like I feel like I've actually made like kind of genuine connections with other people through it. Like recently made this friend, my friend Brad. He was at the Cunnus play. I don't think you were at that one. He played the filing cabinet. Um, but like I recently met him at a bookstore, and I just happened to mention that I was a writer, and he said he was too. So like first thing I did was send him like a PDF of Cunnus. And then like next time I saw him, he was like, wow, I feel like I like really know you now just from reading it. And with all the readings and stuff, it's been great just because it's made so many kind of connections, and I feel like I've like actually made like new friends in a genuine way. And I hope to make things with all these people and like try and write stuff together, just because I really love working with other writers and artists and stuff.
Well, what you're describing is a very Hode-like mercurial process where you kind of are acting as the nexus or the node, where you're interfacing with these other people who are also generating their own creative projects at the same time. It's kind of interesting because it's very like that's the magician's journey, really. That's not really the hero's journey, but that's the magician's journey. That's where you start.
You said Hode like? What is Hode?
So Hode is the Sephira that is associated with Mercury.
Okay.
Different people understand this in different ways. It's obviously from the tree of knowledge, the Kabbalistic tree, but Hode is generally, I would say, so if you're asking me how I would explain it or have explained it in the past, it is the names of the light, so colors. So it's really the names of things that we perceive in the world. It might not be their true name, but it's the name that we know them by. So like making connections, that can be very Hode-like because it's like a kind of the nervous system, like Mercury as a planet rules the nervous system. So it is kind of like these bundles of nerves. Everybody's like generating, vibrating their own energy, but they're also like kind of syncretizing with the mass. So that's basically Hode. But it's important to note that Mercury is not the Sephira. The Sephira is empty. The Sephira is like light passing through space. And the planet is a physical container for that. So it's kind of like, have you ever heard the analogy for a Russian nesting dolls, Christian?
I mean, I know what a Russian nesting doll is.
So basically that's Kabbalah, is a Russian nesting doll. So you have five women with emptiness, because it's just the shell of them, right? And so 5 women with emptiness, that's basically Kabbalah. I mean, those are the densities. That is each material part of them, like the wooden part. That's the materiality, the physical. And then you have the emptiness, which is the spirit part. And then you get down to the deepest density, which is the little baby doll. And she doesn't have emptiness because she's pre-generative. So that's basically the idea, is that you work through conceptually. So that's another thing that is ruled by Hode, is conceptual language. So you were saying like automatic writing. So automatic writing is ruled by that connection between Mercury and the moon, or as I would say, between Hode and Yesod. So between the analogical, conceptual mind and sort of like the childlike or bride-like mind. The mind that doesn't really understand exactly the process of what's happening, but they're tapped into something else.
Okay, cool. Yeah, like I mean, this is all like
I'm sure this is like hitting you. I know we're hitting it really
but,
hard right at the start.
really cool.
I'm sorry about that.
No, I enjoy it. But I guess I do feel like I had that kind of like with my writing, I try and have that kind of childlike approach to it, where I'm like writing at a point where I don't completely understand what I'm writing. I'm just trying to let it all out and like push to my limits if I can. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what you'd be doing. It's so one way you can understand the Sephira are through archetypes. Like you said, you didn't intentionally, through writing the book, intentionally fill the alternative magical characters. You didn't intentionally make them archetypes, but they are archetypes, as you very cleverly said, because you wrote them. So they're all parts of you. You could say masks if you want to use a very Jungian language. I don't really generally use that, but you could say that. Or they're aspects or reflections or refractions. All of those ideas can be expressed in Kabbalah. But basically, the idea is that Hode is a spark. So the spark isn't a flame, isn't like able to fully take shape in the world, like they're not tempered. The whole idea is to sort of travel upwards towards the top of the tree and become like a light that is so powerful it actually overtakes the outer luminaries, the sun and the moon and all the planets and stars. So you are to become your own sort of constellation. That's the whole sort of point. That's one point, at least, or like one way to think of it. And so it makes sense. Like you're pushing as hard as you can. That's exactly what someone at Hode would do. They would be trying to path work their way to the higher sort of forces or knowledge.
Sweet. Awesome.
I'm going hard, Christian. I'll tell you. I'll tell you my secret. I'm going hard because you posted I forgot what book you posted, but you posted a Crowley book, and
Yeah.
because I'm giving you what I'm doing is a crash test for you. So when you when you start reading the Crowley book, you'll be like, okay, this is what that kid was. I'm not a kid, but this is what that guy. I'm older than you, so like I won't do too much hyperstition. But when you hit Crowley, I think in my opinion, the really important thing is to have a basic grasp of the Kabbalah first.
Okay.
Because he writes as most magicians do, in the 3 layers of reality. Like there is an outer layer for like the average person who reads the book, they'll take it more literally. There's an inner layer where he's talking more energetics. And then there's a secret layer where he's talking to the more like Golden Dawn, OTO, higher ranking adepts, which I don't even say I understand because I'm not affiliated with, any of the magic orders like that. But in a way, I do kind of get it because I'm good at Kabbalah first. Yeah. So when I come to the Crowley stuff, I kind of I'm like, oh, okay, he's talking about this. You don't even have to agree. This is the great thing about doing like more the way I do it, is because you don't actually have to agree. You can have your own ideas of the tree and be like, okay, I see what he's talking about, but I'm going to think about it like this. I don't know. I just feel like that for like the way you're talking about like path working, doing this project that's very much of your own, you're generating it. Like it's about you. People gather to talk about your work. The response is interdialogical, very important in magic because all magic arises in discourse. So you could say like Cunnus and the Response Project is very much like a kind of contemporary magical text. And this is something that I posited to various other writers, Dustin Cole, of course, shout out Dustin, Dickie, and one of my co-hosts, Solar Exile. I always tell him this is like, yeah, this is where magic is. It's like not necessarily in like candles and ceremonial, like performance art, but actually it's a lot more about like how you're saying it. Like it's partly of yourself and partly you're creating something and putting it into the aether wave. So you're sort of materializing it in a way and then physically through the text. I don't know. Just so it's sort of an interesting way I've been thinking about fiction writing and having poets and writers on.
Yeah. I think I'd heard you say something along those lines in your interview with Dickie. And that's part of what made me really interested in and hopefully getting to talk to you now is because when I wrote Cunnus and like finished it, I mean, it was just like a inkling of a thought. I was like, I had heard some vague stuff about, like Magick before, but I was like, I feel like this is kind of what what that is, just because it was kind of such a profound like personal experience of just like feeling like I actually did affect myself like spiritually and like develop and grow in a meaningful way, through my own will. So I'm glad you mentioned that because I it's what got me interested in the more kind of esoteric stuff and like why I started reading Peter Carroll, like I mentioned to you earlier, and kind of looking into this stuff a little more.
No, it completely makes sense to me. Like even the number of days that, I mean, I'm not saying you did that on purpose, as you were saying, it's more automatic. So you had what Peter Carroll would call an apophenia or apophenion. He calls it a goddess. So even though it's a clinical psychology term, he actually, which is very chaos magic, he takes it totally outside of its context. He repackages it. He says it's a chaos goddess, the goddess of the sky, or not of the sky, excuse me. She's the daughter of the sky god Uranos. I'm going to use the proper Greek. And she is kind of like secret knowledge. She is death, actually. That's what he posits. I would agree with him. And it's this ability to make connections and sort of be very generative and natural in sort of that state. So just like how you described writing, it's like very much the process of path working, the process of working through the tree. You don't have to understand. You don't have to understand the first time you travel through the tree. I didn't understand. I was just like totally like, oh, I see this color. It's like, this is nice and all this stuff. And I'm not talking about drugs or anything like that. I'm talking about like meditative experiences. So, but writing automatically is a kind of meditative experience. And a lot of, Taoist and Buddhist texts talk about automatic writing. It's not an unheard of process, although I do tend to be very conservative in terms of like working with spirits and the ways that I articulate magic. I think of it as a lot of process of consciousness. So that's why I even wanted you to come on, is because I did recognize your project as being magical in the most fundamental sense. It's a process of consciousness that you're engaged with and other people are also engaged with.
Nice. Well, yeah, you kind of just mentioned meditation a little bit there. And like Buddhism and stuff like that. Like right soon after I had finished writing Cunnus, I read the book Zen Flesh, Zen Bones. Have you read that one?
Yes.
Yeah.
A long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah. But because it did feel like I kind of like realized I needed maybe something kind of spiritual in my life, I guess, after writing it. But I kind of stumbled on that book, and just reading it, it felt like, very profound and meaningful to me. And also it was like hilarious. I like cried laughing a few times reading it. But I don't know, I've just gotten into like meditation and Buddhism ever since then. And I know you're a Tantric Buddhist. That's right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
oh yeah, sorry, Christian. Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't mean to say it so curtly. I'm a tantric Buddhist. I was just looking up the book to make sure I like recalled about the the meat of it.
It's a bunch of Zen koans, I guess.
Right, exactly. I just wanted to make sure. I was like, oh, I better not bullshit to him, like, because I have to like represent Dharma. I have to represent Dharma properly. So I was like, so yeah, Buddhism really is in my opinion. Now, some people don't agree, but in my opinion, both Buddhism, Dharma, and meditation are kind of fundamental aspects of magic. Like people should be doing those things if they want to do magic. Now, for me, I like Tantra is basically all three things mixed together. It's Dharma, it's meditation, and it's magic all at the same time. Plus you. So, right? You're getting to that fifth state of consciousness. So we were talking about a little bit. But a lot of like the magical traditions, like especially like the contemporary ceremonial ones, they will say that no, actually you need the extra step of like these ritual things. But Tantra teaches us that you can affect everything through your mind, is like through your power of visualization, especially. So if you're a good shape rotator, you actually don't need all the additional things. And that's kind of what Zen is too. Zen is about breaking I'm going to use a Kabbalistic metaphor, but it's exactly the same idea. It's about breaking the statues, the clay statues, so that thus breaking the qlippoths, or the sort of husks that prevent the light from sort of being received by us.
Well, and I wanted to ask, so since you like consider yourself a magician, like what does that mean to you personally? Like, how do you, I guess, enact that?
So basically, I think that reality, so this is it's going to sound very chaos magic, but this is totally pretty much on, like I would say, I align with Dharma very strongly for the most part. And my background is chaos magic in a way, but I definitely heavily lean on like a Dharmic worldview, because that's what I believe in and that's what I practice, right? So, but it's going to sound chaos magic. So that's what I want to say, just as a caveat for anyone listening. So for me, I believe that reality is composed of partly of our own minds, our own perceptions of the world dictate what reality will appear as in existence appearance.
Mhm.
And I believe that through our single pointed will, you brought clever, that is how we do accomplish or that's how we accomplish magical action. But for me, it is through my own like mind. It happens within what we would call the mind palace in Buddhism or Tantra, and it's about a complicated sort of pattern of visualizations and color matching and deity names and mantra recitation. So this is like above the pay grade. I don't even, I hesitate to even use that phrase, but I found I never thought that that was that strange, I guess, for me. But I know that as I've been doing the show and going on other shows, like when I get invited on, I realize that my experience isn't necessarily common. Like how I understand Tantra and how I practice it to this day is very alien for most people. So, but I think my ideas of magic are pretty, we'll call it primordial. I think that the elements exist. I think I think we live in a multiverse. I believe in rebirth. I believe that we can amend what people call karma through tantric practices. I do a thing called MahaYoga, which is deity yoga, and a lot of Western magicians find this very interesting because they also try and attempt to sort of practice a kind of deity yoga. But in Buddhism, we think of ourselves as being ontological rather than cosmological. So more of the mind and of becoming. So it's not, we don't necessarily believe in the deity as like arising independently of us. We're very much in this idea of independent origination. So like we don't necessarily like, yeah, we'll have like Tantra has lots of deity forms and lots of like dakinis and different practices like that. And you can say that those things are real to a degree, but they're also of yourself. So a lot of what Tantra teaches you is how to sort of clear your own perceptual aggregates. So basically, that's what magic is. We can affect everything with our own minds, depending on our level of skill. We can use ritual technologies or spiritual technologies like gemstones, herbs, seals, and sigils. Words are the primordial, magical technology. There is no, in my opinion, there is no greater magical technology than words. So, what words? Well, that's debatable, but in general, words are very, very potent, and English words in particular. So, because English is a kind of magical language, it's just a little backwards. It needs remixing. So yeah,
Well,
sorry,
and
Christian. That's basically my idea of
yeah,
magic. That's what it is. It's all of
that's
those
cool.
crazy things together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And well, like I guess for you personally, is like the end goal enlightenment? Is that what you would like be reaching for?
Well, okay, so Tantra does sort of differ from, we'll call it normie Buddhism, as I've referred to it pejoratively in the
Okay.
past. I'm not meaning it in a pejorative way. Dharma is very flexible and ecumenical in a way because it believes that there are different paths for different people. Everyone has different karmas, right? So someone will like follow Tantra and they won't even like practice the same Tantra as I do. They will be totally doing totally different things. And so their path to understanding like what their even soteriological goal is different than mine. So in the kind of deity yoga that I practice, the sort of outcomes are there's multiple choices, and of course samsaric liberation is the highest one, but I also believe in like the vajrification, the adamantization of the body, and also of even though Buddhism doesn't really believe in a fixed self, you can say that there's an adamantization of the spirit as well that helps you travel through what we'll call speculatively hyperspace, like to use a Peter Carroll kind of like panpsychic universe idea. So I believe that the point is what I was talking about at the very beginning. It's like to access death, to access higher knowledge, to bring the good vital energies down or up to your body utilize them in a like energetic way, and also ameliorate your karmas. So not necessarily clear them for every lifetime in one lifetime, but it's said that once you start practicing tantra or any kind of Buddhism, or any kind of path of dharma, and there are multiple paths of dharma, there are not, Buddhism is not the only one. Buddhism just considers itself as, like I said, ontological. So in a way it considers itself superior, although people don't really like when I say that, but it is kind of how it understands itself, a superior to like cosmologies that believe in a singular or multiple divinity. So I'd say my goal is to have that kind of interdialogical relationship with the deity, mend my own karma, and also like live a decent, chaotic neutral or chaotic good life as I can.
Cool. Yeah, I guess thinking about like my own goals with my life and my writing and stuff. I'm not super sure, but I want to try to better myself and connect with others and stuff. This is kind of funny, but I recently had a dream that it was my like destiny to write the books that I'm going to write and that I have written, and like kind of despite myself, no matter what, they would be written. And ever since then, I've felt like a lot more confident and like clear-headed, and just feels like I can just do whatever I'm gonna do and it'll end up being okay. But I feel like getting into like Buddhism and just thinking about these kinds of things and writing has helped me to like realize that in some way, even if it's not true. It's just like feeling that sense of like confidence.
I think it's totally true. I think writing is a great hermeneutic for like understanding yourself and reality. There's no question about it. All the early 20th century magicians were all poets and writers, all of them, even Crowley, like with his like kind of dense, it's not my favorite style, but it's very dense, and he can turn a phrase sometimes. He's not a great poet, but he can turn a phrase. So I'll give him props. I'll give him his snaps where I can. And he's a good magician. He fundamentally understands a lot about magic. Now, did he take it in the totally like the right way? Well, what even is that? I don't know. He pursued his own desires in the end. Buddhism would say that we need to decide what or like overcome our perceptual desires and figure out like what is our one true will or single pointed will. So that's really what meditation is for, is to like break those sort of narrative containers that we have siloed ourselves into, or our like division of self. Like with your characters, like with Cunnus, I mean, it's very much a metaphysical process. Like I have another co-host, Eros, who talks a lot about like integration. So to me, what it sounds like to me, just speculatively, is that you wrote the books and then sort of came to a place of like you don't really know where you're going with it, but you feel very much in alignment and sort of like reintegrated of all those like disparate parts of yourself. You're able to at least starting the process of reconciliation. So this is very important in Kabbalah. You want to always reconcile paradox, whether that paradox is of yourself or of like your relationship with someone else. It firstly comes down to yourself, like your own mind. So once you start to do that, that is the beginning of where maybe in your next book, and I don't want to speak for you or tell you like what you should do. I don't ever do that, and I don't believe in that. But maybe in your next book, what you'll do is you'll start to sort of place the characters within actual like specific archetypes that you want to work through. And then that would be sort of like one of the stages of like becoming a higher adept. One of the stages of like you could say the initiatic process, like to use a very Eolian term.
Cool. Well, I guess I've already started writing my next book. I can tell you about it if you want.
I'd love that. Please do. I want to talk more about your writing.
Yeah. Well, it's still pretty early, so it could change almost completely. But well, I've had a plan of the books I want to write, like long term for a little while, and next on my list is a philosophy book, um, and it's hard to describe, and like again, the plan might change quite a bit, but it's supposed to have, it'll have 5 sections, and it's all aphorisms. There should be a total of 500 aphorisms, and it'll be like symmetrically ordered, so that like after the halfway point, most aphorisms should have like an opposite. So like page 1 will have an aphorism, and then page 500 would have an aphorism that kind of complements itself, you know. But the idea is to kind of build a maze of different philosophical ideas and concepts that I, as a writer, and the readers as well, would become lost within. And there'd even be parts that are like kind of disjointedly formed, so that like it ends in the middle of a sentence, and then another piece will pick up from that same sentence, but there'll be like several possible routes that could pick up from that sentence. So the idea is to try and like get lost within the kind of maze of like different thoughts and concepts, with the end goal that you could, you know, somehow find a way out of it. Because I just think of all like kind of thought and conceptualizations of like reality as being kind of deceptions in some way, but you can only really overcome it through it, you know.
Very well said. The poison is the remedy. That's a very Buddhist way to look at it. Like you're right. Like conceptualization is the, some people will say it's the enemy, but conceptualization is not the enemy. It's all about the story. I think this is the secret sauce of magic, Christian, is that it is all about the narrative threads so if you're in the process of writing your book, what you're sort of describing to me is a journey through the underworld, or the klippa, the sort of inverse tree. And so, which also goes along with the, with your previous title, Cunnus. That is part of that kind of, night side journey, is through the primordial yoni. I'm just saying. But so anyways, you're kind of describing this journey through the dark side of the tree. I think the idea is that you should weave a thread, as you were saying, like you want there to be an exit. You want to tell people that there's a way out. You yourself may not understand even what the way out is. Maybe your path working is just through the tree itself, and you're going to see how it unfolds like a flower, right?
Right.
But in your narrative, you're going to tie a thread, weave a thread, which is what the meaning of Tantra is. It means to weave between the stars. So you're going to weave a thread through narrative and sort of guide people out. And you're going to connect the poems in a specific way. Now, they may not even recognize, you might be the only one with the sort of the key that understands the way that you've laid out the path working. But it should be intuitive enough that someone can follow it, even if they know nothing about magic, or nothing about the nature of reality, or they've never had those questions. There should be a kind of subtle language. You were talking about like there's a relationship between magic, the phonetic quality, sound trapped, which is sound is how you trap space in tantric thinking. So it's the only thing that can sort of like gather that element. It's usually unknown to us. So there's a phonetic quality. There's like also the aesthetic quality of like on the page. This. It's like it's just very basic, like more avant-garde poetry. So I shouldn't say it's a basic. I'm saying this is like the principles of more avant-garde poetry. So what I'm trying to say is that there should be a way out there, because there always is. You can always resolve paradox through something, whether it's through you write this book and then, in 5 years, you're not happy with how you resolved it. So you kind of write a response to the initial piece.
Mm-hmm.
And you provide more verses. Maybe you're like more assured in like the way that you want to maneuver through the different tunnels. So you use certain words, more active language, more verbs. So you kind of give it like an impulse, like a kind of kinetic or energy of velocity. So like an arrow, that's a good way to think of it. Like you give it something that there's a clear exit. But maybe you don't. Maybe you leave it very like opaque. Maybe it's up to the reader to decide.
Right.
That's basically what Magic's about. And like magical writing especially. It's like some authors like Kenneth Grant, who was also a fiction writer, he got lost in his own tunnels. So for me, in the way I look at the tree, this is not that desirable, but it can be useful to explore his ideas, because then you can sort of see, if you think he went wrong, where he went wrong. Or with Crowley, like it's the same thing. You can see like, okay, I don't agree with this part, but maybe this is interesting and maybe we'll apply this formulation here. So it's kind of like that process between like art and science, like it's temperance between those two things.
Right. Well, and my hope with the book would be that, like, in writing it, I might not know the path out of it initially, but maybe even coming back to it, reading it again later on, it becomes clear to me, or it becomes a way through it, because I feel like we're already living kind of trapped in all these different thoughts and concepts, but writing them out, and having it there to directly like face and overcome, that would give you a cleaner way to consider what's around you and everything. And I would hope other readers would find their own paths through it that might be, completely different from mine.
No, that makes complete sense. You act as like the hermit, or like the hermit or the hierophant card, can be both. And you sort of like hold the lamp to the path, but you don't say, oh, everybody follow me. You're saying, I'm going to illuminate my own path, but this is like a way to do it, but everybody sort of has to figure it out for themselves. But they have the initial light as the lighthouse, sort of like the sort of beacon of like how to do it if they get lost. So I definitely appreciate that, and I think that's a great attitude. I think. I mean, you're polished. You know a lot more about this than me, but I'm just saying. I think from a magical perspective or a metaphysical perspective, I think this is the right way to approach it. It's like you don't necessarily know. That's a
Yeah.
lot more organic, right? Like that's a lot more chaos magic. If I was maybe more in the OTO or definitely in the Golden Dawn, like I know a lot of those people, they're very rigid in the way that they would approach it. They're like, there has to be a path working. They're like, you want to go from A to Z, like this and this. For me, I'm like, let's just see how the Marga unfolds, because that's a very Buddhist way. It's like just very like, okay, like we're gonna see where the practices take us, how we can break our own conceptual thinking as we go. So exactly like what you said, there's something very self-reflexive about what you're talking about, and also like what Tantra is talking about, like the ways that we try and think of ourselves and the things that we're doing. It's supposed to break those conceptual ideas eventually. We're not supposed to hold on to them too much. But of course, as you're saying, it also has to serve as a reference point for where we were and where we are.
Yeah. Awesome.
Well, I didn't mean to derail us. I apologize,
No,
Christian.
this has
And
been fun.
okay.
We're so good.
Okay. Well, I'm kind of being remiss in not asking you more about like your process of writing. So let's do a little chronopoesis and return a little bit to that, or maybe to the beginning. What got you into writing initially? What is kind of like your the way that you write? Like I know you said automatic writing, but if you could just like describe that a little bit, and just say like, how do you get in the space to write? Do you think it's like a praxis, like something you do every day, or like however you conceptualize it, like you tell me.
Um, well, I think I've gotten more kind of confident in the way I write over time. Now I feel like whenever I have a project, I'll try and write for it every day, and like even try and get just like a certain word count and stuff, even if I end up not using like half of it. Um, but that's only whenever I have like a clear idea in mind of like the project that I want to work on. Whenever, like, after I finish writing something, I usually don't write like for a while, like maybe a year or whatever, besides just like random journaling or like little short stories or random poems or stuff like that. But I can usually like kind of feel it, like whenever it's time to start a new project, and I'm always kind of thinking about it. But it feels like at a certain point, I'm like, oh, I can feel that I'm ready to get this out there and start really working on it. And it took me a while to, I guess, get to the point where I felt like confident about that, because before I would just feel like constantly worrying that like I need to be writing something, and like, oh, you know, what's wrong with me? Why am I not writing something? But now I feel like I know, like, okay, like the time will come of its own volition, kind of. And but when I'm like actually writing something, it kind of depends on the project, but I will kind of have that automatic writing mindset of just like maybe having a vague intention of what I want to write at the time, but then just kind of letting it out and letting it be whatever it'll be. And then, you know, once I'm finished with the whole project, I try not to like edit at all while I'm actually like in the process of writing something until I got like the full framework for it, or like a full rough draft. But then afterwards I'd go back and, you know, just try and tinker with it to make it cleaner or get a stronger feeling for it. If that makes sense.
That was a great answer, like legit. Because one thing I appreciated about you, since when we became mutuals, but then after I went to the reading especially, is that this is something that came up when you would dialogue with your wife particularly, but I think other people also referenced it, is this sort of like the spontaneity of like like how you sort of conceptualize it. You actually go in very, as you said, very childlike, and it just happens. Like I find this to be I find it to be relatable, because this is how we would look at it in a meditative experience. You kind of let it happen. You never force it. Like it's never like you don't push up against like all the, if you want to use Gnostic framing, you don't push up against all the archons. You're kind of just like letting it happen, like letting it flow through you. And then that's what takes you to the higher experience or the higher knowledge or whatever it is, the lightning strike. And I think that is a lot more what you're describing. It's like so the next book, so I also want to say this is the next book for Peter Carroll, even though you told me you're reading Liber Null right now. Read Apophenia next, because it's kind of a condensation. I'll send you the Amazon link after.
Thank you.
Of course, but it's great. I mean, I really love it. A lot of the like Zoomer kids like that, I guess I'm friends with, they love it too, and because it makes a lot of sense for them. Like, you know, like the tism is very high. I'm not saying that about you. I'm saying for them, but the kind of like ways to path work, they don't necessarily know how to conceptualize it in very like higher conceptual arts language, like humanities language, but they might be able to do it in a mathematical term. So what the book sort of teaches them is the way to sort of flip that framework so they can actually conceptualize it in both ways, that they see that there's not really a difference. It's the same, but it's you just have to kind of be a little more flexible and fluid as you sort of like decontextualize all these things that you thought you knew, which is harder for people who are more, we'll call it special trained kids. It's harder for them to sort of lose the more rigid and precise framework.
Yeah. So the book is kind of about, I guess, approaching magic in a more free form way. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Okay. And even the way, but it's really about the mind. So this is what I found really interesting when you were telling me you started with like reading Peter Carroll, is that his ideas of like the mind are almost identical in a lot of ways to Dharma. Now, again, I said that there's an ethical framework difference. There is. We only do things that are karmically generative. We would never do things that are karmically degenerative. But there's a flexibility even in the understanding of what those things are. So we're not like rigid traditionalists, nor are we like total, like we don't, we have boundaries, and like like, you know, we have good healthy conceptualizations of self, you could say, whatever that is. We're not like totally free range, we're not feral or anything, you know, we kind of can reconcile ourselves in the material world. So he's talking about a lot of the same things, and in sort of like ways to look at magic as being from the mind, as being a process of wisdom science, like you're doing right now. Like you're studying Crowley, you're reading Peter Carroll, you're gonna read other books. Hopefully you read Apophenia, hopefully you read a little K-bal, which is Kabbalah, but that's how Peter Carroll calls it. And so all of those things will actually, in his idea, his worldview, those things will all inform your writing, because you'll start to, even if you don't integrate it at an intellectual level, there'll be a subconscious way that you sort of refer to those ideas, and they'll start to emerge. That doesn't mean that what you're doing now doesn't already refer to them. It already refers to it. It's just, it'll be a more active and conscious process, the like more wisdom you gain.
Cool. But yeah, well, I do hope, and I guess kind of feel already that, like, as I write more and more, I kind of become more aware of the patterns that come through in my writing. I guess just more aware of myself, but also just like kind of aware of the process and like what it kind of leads to in a way. Like with what I was saying about my writing process and how I feel like more confident, like that I know the inspiration will come eventually and stuff like that. But I like that too, because it means I can push even further to like further boundaries, which I hope and imagine are broadening with each thing I write.
Well, that's the whole goal. If you want to say, I mean, I don't necessarily call myself a magician. I would say sorcerer, but that, you know, the even the difference between that is quite nebulous. So I'll go with the magician framing, and I appreciate that you you know, titled me as that. It's kind of a, you know, it's cool. Like I think you'll appreciate it when you see the title card, which I already have picked out, as I told you. But not to tell myself too much. But no, I think that it's the same. It's like exactly what you're talking about. You're like, I don't even know. I've been doing it for a long time, and I don't even totally know like what I'm doing, where I'm going. I have ideas, right? Like the conceptual framework to like what I think is going on, and where I want to go, and what I should achieve in meditation, and you know what my daily practices should look like, and I do them. And I think it's really important to do those kind of repetitive exercises in a way. But I also think like sometimes it's just about the marga. It's just about the path. Like for me, this is just how it is. It's about the marga. I can only control myself, but that is part of what you're talking about, like a self-awareness, a self-referentiality of like you are perceiving yourself in much greater contour than you did before. So that just it simply speaks to the power and the hermeneutic of what you're doing. It's magical journaling. It's very much like Jung's Black Book, not the Red Book, but the Black Book. So where he was really talking about his like actual Kabbalah ideas, his metaphysics, and of course he distilled it into the Red Book, which contains all those things, but it's not so explicit. So that's what you could consider it, like that. It's like you're sort of going through the process of clearing those aggregates of who you think you are, what you think you are, and how you even perceive yourself in the world. And then with the responses, how other people perceive you. Because even though it's as an art project, it's partly true, right? Like a lot of the things that you draw from are really about you.
Yeah.
So
It's all about me.
that's right. So, you know, there's nothing, it's that's another Hode like thing, like we talked about at the very beginning. It's like there's a magnetic quality to the prince. So that's the archetype of Hode, or Mercury is a prince. So he's not fully realized as the king yet. He's still working through the path. He's very magnetic, and he can bring people together, and he can also bring words together, because because that's really the quality of Hode at like the most basal, is that it's not syntax necessarily, but it is the sort of the perception of what words mean and then how to put them together in a conventional way. And you have to understand the conventions before you can do the inverse or break them. So I think that's really interesting about what you said.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Well, Christian, let's talk about. I know you said you didn't really have a religious or spiritual thing at the beginning. Well, maybe that's not true. Maybe you did have a spiritual connection, but it was more latent. Um, have you ever like when did you start fully coming into like this idea that the universe is greater maybe than you initially perceived it as, or that you were kind of taught as a kid, or had as a young adult, or whatever it was?
Well, I guess I was raised Catholic, but I was never really like into it, you know. And I don't think my parents were that super into it like when I was a child either. Um, but they, you know, I had communion and everything, and they had me go to like a Sunday school sometimes and stuff like that. But I never really felt any kind of connection with like Christianity, really. Um, Let me think. As I got older, I guess actually getting in, like starting to read philosophy in college, and also reading this writer who's my absolute favorite, Wittgenstein. I felt like I guess more of a connection to like to the universe or just to like life in general. Um, Especially with philosophy, like Plato's dialogues. When I read those, there was a kind of playfulness to them, like kind of like what we were talking about before, at least in how I read them. Because I understood like Socrates' dialogues as not actually pointing to something that is like concrete and real. Like, you know, they play like they're trying to find the truth of this or that concept or whatever, but they never come to a conclusion. And it seemed obvious to me that, you know, in the dialogue, Socrates is just pointing to the fact that these concepts and definitions are ultimately like illusory and everything. Um, but that kind of playfulness of it really kind of spoke to me in a way that I guess made me realize all the different, just all the different things in the world, you know, and just made me really think about it, feel like I had a connection to it. And then also reading Wittgenstein, I read his works around the same time, his plays, um, especially his play The Water Hen. That really moved me in a way because it felt like I was reading myself in a way, and it was just like a profound connection, and like felt like someone was almost speaking to me directly in a way that I really needed to hear at that time. And I guess it's through kind of art and like literature and stuff that I felt like I realized just a deeper connection to the world around me, and had these kind of feelings of like oneness with the universe, and like just connected to all things, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
mean, you're touching on the fundamental nature of reality, Christian, is like that's Plato. I mean, that that Platonic idea is whether you fully subscribe to Plato or the later Platonists or the Neoplatonists or how it got reinterpreted in Kabbalah. Definitely there's both Platonic and Neoplatonic influences, a lot of them in Kabbalah. There's a lot of them in Tantra. I mean, I joked about being a shape rotator. That's one of the fundamental ways you work through a mandala, is through the Platonic solids and the shapes associated with colors and elements. And this is kind of the nature of magic, is like you could say like a lot of people that have been on the show will be like, oh, Jin, it's like the Greek formulation of that's what it is. It's like the number nine. I've gotten in many arguments about this, Christian, like how I conceptualize like the paradox of numbers. Buddhism says it's 10. So, for me, I just accept that. Like, it makes sense. I understand it conceptually. I'm not fixated on like a 9, and so it makes sense to me. But I understand what they're like other people are talking about, and of course, it makes there's a 9 element in Dharma because our magic number is 108. So, all of these things are reoccurrent. Like I was saying with apophenia, there's like a mathematical component, there's a scientific component, there's a sort of creative and an arts component. Poets are the most metaphysical. If you're asking me what I really think, I think that poets are the carriers of the Aeonic word. Now, I'm sure you're going to be like, what are you talking about? And that's totally fine. Crowley posits he's not an axialist. Like I would say I'm an axialist, which is what Dharma is, but he would say that there's a cycle of time, and each cycle of time is called an aeon, which is the Greek word. And in Sanskrit, we would say kalpa, same thing. And so the cycles kind of change. His idea was this is the coming time of the Aeon of Horus, or the Aeon of the sun. I say, for me, it is the Aeon of the daughter, but the daughter is a complement to the sun. So it's like the unification of the sun and the moon. That's one way to think of it, like the alchemical marriage. Like the polarities become balanced and tempered rather than in extremity. This has nothing to do with politics or nothing to do with like the Aquarian age. It could, because it's a lot to do with like how we understand both ourselves and the multiverse. So what I'm saying is Plato is, I mean, he's asking those same questions. He's giving ways to rectify the allegory of the cave. We use that exact metaphor in Tantra. It's not just a metaphor. It's like actual like way you work through the mind palaces. You can do it through a cave visualization. So again, these are all like fundamental ideas. It's like, what are we here for? What are we doing? I always say it's like be generative. I think even Crowley would agree with that. Like he said, like the Aeon of the Horus is like very like angry, like warlike, knowing your will, very kind of like daddy dom energy. And the Aeon of the daughter is like what you're saying though. It's a lot more playful. It's not about gender or anything like that. It really isn't. It's just about how she reconciles those sort of ferocious elements of the sun. So he's not so like blazing hot in the world. He's like tempered. So that's what her role is like to temper those ideas. You very much embody this archetype. I very much embody this archetype, maybe to a lesser degree. But it's someone who's like able to engage with it, be playful with it, not be like, it must mean this, like even the title of the book. It doesn't, you're okay with reserving something for yourself, which is Aeon of the Sun. That's his power. You reserve something of the meaning for yourself. And then the Aeon of the daughter is that you engage with other people exactly what you're doing.
But so sorry, so for the aeons, that's groups of like blocks of time?
Blocks of time divided into specific archetypes.
Okay. And so for those blocks of times, is that like within a person's life, or like world time?
Cosmic time. Yeah, you're hitting it. World time, cosmic time, like movement of the planets and the stars.
Okay.
But it's always perceptual. Like if we don't recognize like people will say, oh, we live in Kali Yuga. Right? Like I'm sure you've heard that before.
Yeah.
So in Tantra, this is actually a very flawed, we don't have to get into the weeds. I'm sure it'll be interesting for you in like 2 years. You'll be like coming back and you'll be like, yeah, Jin, tell me about this. But right now it's probably like a too heavy metaphysics. But think of it like, what if their time scale is wrong? What if time scale is actually in perception of the worlds around us, of each other, our karmic connections to each other, the way that geopolitics, I'm not talking about politics at like the superficial level. I'm saying the way we relate to each other. What if the turning of the wheel, if you want to call it that, the movement through time and space, what if that's predicated on our own consciousness? That's my idea. So if people think that they're stuck in Kali Yuga, they're stuck in Kali Yuga. But if people are like, oh, we're in the new Aeon, then they're in the new Aeon. So regardless of the movement.
It's kind of like, instead of there even being like a distinction between the cosmic time and like a personal experience of time in a person's life, it's like they're one and the same, and it's all based off of your perception.
Perception is basically one of the fundamental gateways of magic. It's undeniable. It's such an important part of Kabbalah. It's such an important part of what Crowley talks about. It's an important part of just everything. Just as perception, as self-perception, and the way we perceive the world. Like, what preconceptions are we putting on things? What names are we calling things?
Hmm.
Are we being the most accurate, the most Luciferic, the most Luciferian when we call something by its name? And the whole idea of Luciferianism is to call things by their true or primordial name. So, like, I'm sure you've heard or you've seen, I'm sure you've seen the Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant.
Yeah.
It's very similar, right? Like they're calling the hosts of God by their name. So this is a really important idea in magic, is that you want to call the spirits by their oldest name. So because that gives you some kind of power over them.
And when you say their name, you mean like an actual name?
You can say it's a metaphor for just like the nature of something. So if you
So like,
call
yeah,
like
recognizing the real truth
correct.
of
You
things
got
around
it.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, you got it. You can tell you've been reading Zen because you cracked it right away. Good job.
Cool. And so you mentioned earlier like the numbers, I guess 0 to 9, and colors in relation to Plato. That would be like the actual true forms that exist, because they're like the basis of forms of perception, I guess.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. You got it. The forms are the true nature of reality, but those forms have little pieces of what we would call aggregates, which in Sanskrit we call skandhas, or in Kabbalah they would call it qlippoths. Same thing. They just mean aggregates. Like concrete has little aggregates in it. It's exactly the same idea. So in Tantra, at least, the idea is to rectify the elements. So dispel all the aggregates that sort of inhibit our true perception, or our perception of the truth.
Right.
So once we do that, it's like a balancing. People can just think of it as like a balancing of the energies. You want equal proportion of like fire, water, earth, air, and then space. So that's basically the idea, is like you're always trying to reconcile these like alchemical natures of things. And by doing that, you're in the process of like discovering what the truth is, but the truth is really ineffable and can never truly be described. I know
Right.
that's very unsatisfying for a lot of people.
Well, it makes me think, because like, of course, as a writer, if you were just writing in a way that was supposed to just reflect the true forms of things, it might not be very interesting to read or whatever. You have to work with, I guess, like the aggregates, like you're saying, and all
Mhm.
these kind of false perceptions, in order to hopefully, I guess, create a feeling in the reader of the true forms, or of some kind of truth that would feel ultimately meaningful, I guess.
That was great what you just said, because the aggregates themselves are not evil. This is what a lot of people misperceive. They'll say, "Oh, the klipas, the skandhas are evil," or they're even misperceptions. Not necessarily. There's an idea in later Kabbalah and also in Tantra that the aggregates themselves can actually be vehicles for perception of the truth. It's how do we understand them? How do we work through them, like you're talking about? Like a lot of what we've talked about is path working, is like understanding the characters maybe in a more naturalistic way. But then when you go back in second or third or fourth readings, or through time is a great hermeneutic in itself, in and of itself. So when you go back and read your work, you'll be like, okay, I see what I was doing there. I was working through this idea, whether you intended it to be that meaning or not at that time.
Right.
Just that you're going to return to it, and you'll see, okay, so I need to think about it in this way, and maybe your view changes, and that's totally okay too. So that's another way to work through aggregates, is where you sort of shift perception of your view. So you maybe don't view things in such a not that you do. I don't think you actually do. I think that's what's really cool about you, is you don't necessarily view things in black or white terms, which I try not to either, because I find that that is very inhibiting in many ways.
Right. For sure. And like, I I think this is kind of, I guess, more of like a practical thing with writing. I think if you like have a strict idea of what you want to write, or like you put too much effort into each sentence in a way, you'll be inhibiting yourself because you're trying to think about it too consciously. And I guess in the terms we're using, you're kind of just thinking using the aggregates through all these like specific approaches and trying to think about how other people will see it and stuff like that. But if you just kind of let it out and write in a more like primordial way, I guess you could say, like without forethought or like without
You want forethought. Forethought's okay. Epinoia is okay.
but without I guess overthinking it to the point of where
Yes.
you're writing specifically for another, you know?
Yes. Yes.
I think
Yeah,
that
exactly.
it inhibits just the ability to let things out that can like impact people or like have real emotion or feeling to them, you know?
Totally. No, you're totally right. You're totally right. I know I hit you really hard with metaphysics and all of that, but
No,
no,
it's fun. I had a lot of fun.
I knew you could take it, Christian. I know what a bright guy you are. Like I watched I heard, and everyone had such great things to say. I was like, he can take a little, what me as a little bit more Gevratic will say. You'll figure out what that means after. I'm sure you'll be like, oh, I have to figure out all these things. So, but Gevra is I'll just explain it to you quickly so it's not so like a random reference, but it's the Sephira related to Mars, and it actually refers to the teacher. The teacher has to explain things in a way that is understandable to multiple people, but he can't deviate so much from the truth. So that's why I made that joke, is that you're seeing me, it's like a little fiery, but it's actually not intentionally fiery. It's actually trying in the best way, like as a flawed person, and not even as a superior magician or anything like that, just someone who has like relatively a kind of coherent worldview that we're just, or well, some people might not think it's coherent, but I have a worldview that you're interested in. We're dialoguing about it. So I have to try and articulate it in a way that, in a language that you understand, and then also people listening understand. So this goes along with what you were talking about when you write for other people. How much in perception are you of the audience? This has nothing to do with writing, even though that's sort of the process that you gave. This is all to do with magic. Like you can just replace writing with magic and it's exactly the same. Do you do the thing for yourself? And what is that? Meaning, is it for your desire? Is it for your will? What is your will? Do you even know what that is? I'm not saying you Christian, but a lot of people don't.
Right.
And they'll say desire is will. This is like for a Buddhist, for me, I get autistic about this because I'm like, no. But it's like it's a process of consciousness. We have to be aware of like our boundaries. And so I think what you're talking about is actually more of the Gevra part of perception rather than the watery part, where the watery part is about the mass, the multiplicity, not necessarily the mass, where you're thinking about everybody, you're worried about their perceptions of you and your work. But the fiery portion is like, no, I'm going to actually do this for myself, but I'm going to put it in the world like an arrow. And you're going to actually allow for people's perceptions to take shape around that, whether you agree with it or not, like the title.
Yeah. And it's like, if you are, I think, writing with the masses, I guess, in mind, you're going to lose out on that kind of ability or to connect with others and different perceptions. And I feel like you'll end up writing it for an audience that doesn't really exist or that wouldn't really get anything out of it in a meaningful way.
I mean, that you're just using a kind of remix. Like you're not remixing it. I'm saying that you're reinterpreting it in a very clever way for people who are probably more listening for you. Writing people, like all lit people, online lit people, all that, whatever. I don't even know. It's so decoherent at times. I don't know what the right labels are. I'm going to cop to it right now. But no, you're saying it for them. And like, I appreciate that because that is sort of the point of the show, is like to have these like interdialogical relationships where I give you my Kabbalah and you give you your Kabbalah. You give me your Kabbalah. And then we sort of like see how other people can understand that through that process.
Yeah. And, hopefully we're coming to understand each other better and everything. I really appreciate it. So just the way that that you're talking about it in this kind of fiery way and everything, because it's like you don't really get opportunities that often to talk in the way that we're talking. You know, someone has to put it out there at first for you to like to give you a chance to give it back. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is how my best, like my closest friendships have formed, like through the show and through everything, is usually because I'm never hard on people. I don't think of myself as like a mean dude. Like I think I'm super nice and all that stuff, but people do find me like a little because I have a Sagittarian bluntness. Now I don't like blaming astrology for anything, but on this I will. Um, you know, whether I believe that or not, it doesn't matter. It's just a excuse I give anyway. So I am a little blunt and I'm like a little forward. And so people have often noted that about me is like but they also think it's kind of magnetic too in a way. I'm not saying it's like the best trait. I don't think that. I'm just saying that people have noted that about me and I have tried to temper it. But like if you go listen to me on other shows like on YouTube or whatever, I used to, especially when I started, I was like, oh, I was just like ready to go. I want to talk full Kabbalah, full Tantra, like every moment. Now I feel like the power is much more in the dialogue. So maybe it's just getting old. I don't know. But yeah, that's basically where I am, Christian. But I really appreciate that you came on, like sincerely. I'm glad that you tolerated me, didn't like rage quit or anything. I love your project. I love Cunnus. I can't believe I said that on air, but that's okay. It is what it is now. You know, I'm not a prude, but I'm probably a little more conservative in the way that I speak on recording. That's just the truth.
Oh,
Everybody who knows me knows that. But I said it, so there you go. And the Cunnus Response Project, which you were again very kind to send me. I sincerely invite you back on the show if you ever want to come back on and
for
discuss
sure.
anything you want, or your work or whatever it is. I'll let you. You know, you can throw around. We can figure out another topic. But I really like for you to come back because I'd actually like to see your progress as like a magician. Maybe not just as a writer, but really what I'm interested in, because this is more of an occult show, is like where you're at with thinking about reality and conceptualizing it. And it doesn't have to be about what grade or ceremonial robe you have. It's really about the ways you're thinking about it. That's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. Well, I think that'd be awesome. You know, I've been wanting to like have a friend that I can talk about this kind of stuff with more because it seems like so dense and kind of hard to get into, and I don't really know a good starting point. So I'd appreciate it. You know.
Well, you are always welcome in my DMs. I will say that on record, on recording. I won't even edit it out. Um, Asking me about anything magical. I'm more than or dharmic. Usually people ask me dharma things, but I'm happy to
Yeah.
venture into the other thing. And you're
Oh,
always
no.
welcome to ask. And I will send you the link for apophenia, and I will include all your links for both books or through all three books in the show notes. But I want you to plug them and plug your Twitter also, just so people know where to find you and all the kind of like gonzo spaces. I know they're not spaces, they're on Zoom. So it's, I shouldn't say that, but I think of them as, in my mind, it's spaces. So anyways,
Yeah.
I'll let you plug. Thank you so much, Christian. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah. So everybody, just again, Cunnus and Cunnus Response Project are available now on Anxiety Press. You can find me on Twitter or X as Mr. Cunnus. Book of 1,000 Poems is available on DFL Lit. You can go on dfllit.com and find it there. I'm not doing any like online reading things right now, but I might be working on something along those lines soon. So if so, just keep an eye out on Twitter. And thank you, everybody. I love you so much.